So good morning. This is Natalie Gilley with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Welcome to our first webinar of 2021. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get the webinar started today. So welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here and thanks for joining the group. We have quite a few people on today. The webinar today for the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network is going to be about imagery and biking and walking advocacy. And today we'll be shining a spotlight on Fergus Falls. So this is not a new community to this audience. You folks have heard from Fergus Falls before. In the past, we have featured them. They're a bicycle-friendly community and have a number of bicycle-friendly businesses, which you may have heard a little bit about. And today, the featured topic will look at bicycling and walking in Fergus Falls in a little bit different way than we have before. So this time, we're going to look at the imagery and talk a little bit about that. So first of all, I want to just have everyone, give everyone the opportunity to introduce. And if you could go into the chat box and type your name, your location, and what is your favorite wintertime activity? I have a snow globe up on the screen as an image here. And if you were to shake the snow globe and look inside, what is it that you see? You don't have to speak to the image I also included on the screen, but I've included a picture of my fat bike and my snowshoes. So one of my favorite wintertime activities is to go fat biking and also to go snowshoeing. And this gives me a chance to bike out to places that I can snowshoe at. So thank you everyone for joining today. I see Pam from Wilmer here, and I'm kind of trying to look to see if there's other folks that are introducing in the chat box. Jacob Davis from Fargo, Luke Ewald from Jackson. We've got Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn Center, Pelican Rapids, Fergus Falls. So I see some snowboarding, cross-country skiing, lots of outdoor activities in the winter. So that's great to see that people are getting out and about, even though the weather is cold and we've got snow on the ground. So the group here today, the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network, has a purpose statement, and the reason we're coming together here and we connect as leaders across the state of Minnesota is to connect bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how we're lifting up walking and biking culture in their communities. So this is where we kind of start and come back to as a group for this particular group of leaders. The land acknowledgement for BikeMN here is, I will go ahead and read this to all of you, and thank you to the folks who have asked about this, and we're happy to share this with you as well. We want to acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral land of the several indigenous groups, including the Dakota, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Cheyenne, Odo, Iowa, and Meskwaki people. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm that the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities. Despite centuries of colonial violence, this is still and always will be Indigenous land. Indigenous peoples are still here, demonstrating innumerable talents and gifts in the midst of continued oppression. They must be celebrated and uplifted. So you'll see on the screen here, and maybe Ted, if you want to pop it in the chat box, you might be a step ahead of me already here. But there is a link on here to a website you can go to if you'd like to see which native land that where you are right now is located on. So that's something you can check out for yourself if you would like. So this is 2021. This is the first webinar we're kicking off the year with. Typically we meet on the third Wednesday. Yesterday was busy, so we pushed to today. So February, we will return to the third Wednesday of the month. And then that will be on February 17th from 11:30 to 12:30 here on Zoom. And then in March, the date is March 17th, 11:30 to 12:30 as well. If you're joining as a guest today and you're not already part of the network as a member, feel free to email me, Natalie@BikeMN.org, if you'd like to join, and we'll get you added to our listserv. That provides you access to our Google folder and the Google group so that you can access any documents and also get links to the replays of our previous webinars.
Hey, Natalie, this is Wayne Hurley. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Are we still doing this webinar even though the Bike Summit is also on that same date, March 17th?
That's a great question. You know,
I can answer that, yes,
thank you,
because
Dorian.
Bike Summit is going to be virtual, pre-recorded, and from 4:30 to 6:30 in the evening.
Oh, very good. Thank you for that, Dorian, and thanks for the question, Wayne. We'll have to make sure that, well, so you'll have an opportunity to connect with BikeMN and other advocates and educators statewide twice on the 17th. So,
And you're welcome to drink a green beer while you're listening in on the webinar.
Well, there you go. This is so rousing introduction for the March 17th webinar. Don't let it steal the thunder of March 7th or February 17th. So we welcome you to join then as well. So moving along here, I have a couple of slides here on the Safe Routes to School Network. That is also a network that holds monthly webinars, and many of you that are on this call might also be on that network group. Their next webinar will be on February 11th from 10 to 11 about Youth Prize, YPAR initiative, and youth engagement. So if you'd like to join there, reach out to Jill Chamberlain, and then you can get connected with the Safe Routes to School Network. So I want to introduce our first speaker today. It's very exciting to have two speakers today, as we usually do. Our first speaker is Michele Anderson. She is the Rural Program Director for Springboard for the Arts, a community and economic development organization for artists based in Minnesota. Michele has launched nationally recognized rural programs at the intersection of the arts, historic preservation, health, and economic development. Her writing and ideas on dismantling stereotypes of rural life have been featured in mnartists.org, the New York Times, and more. Michele is also a pianist and creative writer and lives in Fergus Falls, Minnesota with her husband, Spencer, and their son, Ashton. Michele, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this conversation. So as Natalie mentioned, my name is Michele. I'm the Rural Program Director at Springboard for the Arts. And if you could go to the next slide. Today, I'm going to be sharing some stories about how we have engaged the arts and creative community in the Fergus Falls area. Well, yeah, you can stay there, around active living and bike and pedestrian efforts here. As many of you know, Fergus Falls has a lot of great advocates for bike and pedestrian work, and we consider them to be partners. And so I wanted to share a little bit about how some of those relationships began and kind of led to some really significant and high impact projects. So at Springboard, to give a little more background, we support artists across the state and even across the country in making a living and a life. But really what that means to us is that we're trying to create communities that can really tap into their local creative people power. So creative people power is kind of how we frame our work. And we think of it as a natural resource in every community, that arts and creativity exist in every community. And just like solar power, wind power, where you need windmills or wind turbines or solar panels to generate that energy from the sun or the wind, every community needs an infrastructure to tap into their local creativity. And so we, beyond what I'm going to talk about today, we do a lot of work just trying to help communities create the conditions for a strong arts and culture community, because we really believe that artists are essential to helping communities meet their potential, to get unstuck from long time problems, and to engage new voices in really important conversations. I'll share a little bit more about how you can read on our creative people power kind of approach at the end of this presentation. So next slide. So what I'm going to share today, it's a little more than imagery. So I guess I'm really talking about the role of artists in getting people out in their community and enjoying it. And in this case, biking. And in some ways, our work around this topic happened by intuition and luck. And I actually really believe in the power of intuition in community building. So way back in May 2012 when Springboard first opened its rural office. So we're based in St. Paul, but I was hired to start our first rural office. We wanted to really demonstrate that we were here for the whole community, not just for artists with a capital A that are kind of the stereotypical artists that showcase in fancy galleries, but really that we're here to help the community tap into that creative people power. So one of the first things we did was we saw that Partnership for Health, and I don't know if Patrick's on this call, but he's been a big part of this work. We saw that they were, hosting a bike or walk to school week. And so just felt like it was a good opportunity to show how the arts can promote walking. So we spent maybe $20 on some decorations at Ben Franklin and hosted a bike decorating party with very little notice, just one of those, spur of the moment events. And we had this really lovely turnout. That's the mayor there decorating bikes with his little kids. Really what I'm sharing today is how a $20 event like that can lead to what you see below, which is actually a $50,000+ public art sculpture on our bike trail. So I'll share more about how we got there. Next slide. So like I said, that bike decorating party day, and I think this is a really essential part about creative people power, is that it's not so much about the the results in the arts. I think we often go towards how can we get that big art center? How can we get that permanent art sculpture in our community? But it's really about the relationships and the process that we're trying to help communities tap into. And so what came of that bike decorating party is relationships, really. I got to know Patrick at Partnership for Health. He started to come to my office quite often, and we just really started to learn more about each other's work and our goals. And a big part of creative people power is creating these reciprocal relationships between artists and their communities. So if we want artists to help communities solve problems, we also have to make sure we're willing to hire artists and pay them for the incredible perspective that they bring to this work. So next slide. So what started to happen was we just started involving Partnership for Health and their staff really in a lot of different projects, because we trusted them. We felt that we had similar values in community building, even if it seemed on the surface we were doing very different work. So when we hired a theater company to do this original production on the former state hospital campus, it just made sense to talk to Partnership for Health about, what if we actually did biking theater? How could that get people on their bikes, both to see the Kirkbride building, which is an expansive campus in Fergus Falls, to see it as a public space where you can go and walk and bike. And it also helped us solve a problem, because we had scenes going all around this campus that would take too long for people to walk to. So it was, meeting several goals all at once, plus making kind of a spectacle of this theater production and making it incredibly memorable. Just seeing kids and people that maybe don't normally ride their bike, but to participate in the theater production, that was a big encouragement. And working with Partnership for Health to bring the bike fleet so that people who didn't have bikes could rent one for the day. So we just kind of started to naturally envelop biking into anything we could. So next slide. And that led to a even longer term project. So we have a artist residency program at our Fergus Falls office, where artists come from all over the country and they do projects with the community. And we wanted to see what would happen if we had an artist work a little more long-term with the local bike community. So with Pedal Fergus Falls and Partnership for Health, to really just do some more long-term projects that could bring that artist perspective to the goals of the bike community. And so we brought Mary Roethlisberger, who also goes by Mary Welcome, to Fergus Falls, and she did this beautiful photography project called This Is My Ride, and just took these very simple photographs of people that she found out and about. So she would just kind of wander the town and stop people if they saw them on their bike and ask them some questions about what they like about biking in Fergus Falls and what gets them, you know, their favorite place to go. And she both printed these photos she worked with the Daily Journal to print the photos in the local newspaper, which was just a really nice way to get these photos in front of the general public. And then if you go to the next slide, she also made an expansive display of the photos in our windows, just on the corner of Court Street and Lincoln. You know, it's a really simple project, but I think anytime you show, take a theme like biking and just show the different stories behind people and what motivates them, you really start to learn a lot about the community and kind of maybe things that you wouldn't have thought about before. So there is a website that I can send a link to in the chat where you can actually read how people responded. And one of my favorite stories behind that was one of the people she interviewed, his family came and told us that it meant so much to have his photograph displayed downtown because he had kind of always been stereotyped as a certain type of person, and it allowed him to share kind of a new part of his story. And in her interview, he talked about how he likes to ride his bike and pick up trash around the community. And I think he was really moved by the chance to tell a new story to the community about himself. And if you live in a small town, you know that people kind of get cast as these characters, and it's hard to get out of that story once you're pegged into it. So it had multiple effects. So the next slide. So I think the really important thing about this goes back to those relationships and what happens when you are, you know, partnering with, when you're doing these smaller low risk projects like the bike decorating party or bringing a bunch of bikes to a theater production, is that you get to know people well enough that when an opportunity comes up and you don't have a lot of time, you can work real fast and make something happen. So Patrick from Partnership for Health showed up at my office one day and he said, if I remember right, that the Super Bowl, because it was coming to Minnesota, was giving out grants to different communities that had projects to engage local youth in active living. And at the same time, he mentioned that the local DNR had purchased this land at the Central Lakes Bike Trail, and they were planning on turning it into a new trailhead with restrooms and picnic benches and so forth. And he said, could we do something together here and make some kind of an art structure, a play sculpture? And I said, sure, how much time do we have? And he was like, we have, I think it was maybe 2 weeks to apply. But the thing is, we had done so much before. We knew so much about each other, about our processes, that we were able to work real fast on getting a proposal together. And we took a really unique approach to this public art project. So if you go to the next slide, this is the Super Bowl celebration when they came and gave us the big check. And probably one of the most surreal moments of my life was getting Super Bowl money for an art project. So go to the next slide, please. And what I really want to share here is that going back to this idea of creative people power, I think it's so important to remember that one of our biggest sources of creative people power in our community is our kids. And we really set out with intentions to not just plop down a piece of public art in this place, but really to build a sense of ownership, especially among the kids in the community, and to ask them what they would like to see there. And also it was a chance to get them to ask them questions about what would get them and their families out on this trail, what would make them want to come back. and give them a chance to think about public space and learn just what public space really means in a community. And so Naomi Schliessman and I gave a series of interactive workshops to the 4th graders in Fergus Falls, and then a set of high school students as well. And we did different workshops where they got to write poetry about the new sculpture, like, you know, just writing what they wanted to see in the sculpture. And then it led to these drawings. I love that they just naturally put in scales. You can see the 6 feet, 4 feet markings there. They were very specific, and I wish I could show you all of these. But what we did was we took these drawings, you can go to the next one, and we put out a call for artists, a national call, and asked the artists to propose something that would be inspired by these drawings. And so we got a great set of applications, and you know, my favorite here is calming music inside. By the way, that's just the detail these kids were thinking about is incredible, and I would love to see more kids involved with designing public art from this process. But the result was we selected Greg Mueller, who lives in Lutsen, Minnesota. You can go to the next slide. And he saw, he tried to just, you know, it was hard to do any one drawing from these kids because we had hundreds of them to look at, but he saw themes. Some of the themes he noticed were trees. They had a lot of trees incorporated into their drawing, and then swinging and places for imaginative play. So you see that bridge there that goes over kind of a river of rocks. And then of course, you know, the structures are both supposed to look like a tree and the tire of a bike. And then those are tire swings that you can swing on. You can't really see the view here, but then the trailhead of the Central Lakes Trail wraps around this sculpture. So it's the first thing you see when you park your car. We like to think of it as like a destination. So if somebody is biking up from the south, that maybe this sculpture motivates them to keep coming all the way to Fergus Falls and then spend time here, right? So it was really beautiful to go from these kids' drawings to this sculpture, and it's just an amazing thing to see people out there playing when you drive by. Of course, in the winter, not so much, but it's been up for a few years now. So next slide. So I just want to, I could talk for a lot longer, but I want to wrap up by saying there's so much momentum in Fergus Falls, and again, it goes back to those relationships and the ability to respond when an opportunity comes up. And I think that translates as well to even in crisis or emergency. So beyond biking, beyond kind of local problem solving, is the arts can really help build those relationships where communities are more resilient because they can act quickly on things like this. From all of these projects, we did a project called the Year of Play, and one of the artists we worked with was Jake Crone, and he started to, I can't talk in detail about the Year of Play, but through that project we started exploring the Cycling Without Age program and just dreamed of bringing it to Fergus Falls. I take no credit for this coming, but he then started building some relationships with Pioneer Care and doing the fundraising. And so now we do have the Cycling Without Age program hosted by Pioneer Care and Pedal Fergus Falls. And if you go to the next slide, I think the important thing too is that Springboard isn't the only one doing these bike and art projects. So Wayne Hurley, who has been a good, you know, partner with Springboard, kind of, you know, he got very inspired to hire some local artists to do artistic bike racks. And so these were installed sometime in the last year and a half or two. And they are at every arts organization downtown. They were created by Carl Zachman and Naomi Schliessman. We did play a small role in this. So Springboard has a toolkit for making artistic bike racks, just leads you through the whole process on how to do a call for art. And so Wayne did use that toolkit to do this. But I think that's the beautiful thing about creative people power, is that by demonstrating and kind of showing what's possible with the arts, we're now seeing people just take these ideas and run with them and make them their own as well. And And that's, I think, just the most important thing about this is that it's regenerative and people continue the momentum on their own. So if you go to the next slide, I'm wrapping up here, but that philosophy of creative people power, we really believe people are the agents of change and that creativity drives that community change. So we need artists for any type of problem solving, any type of advocacy. We need them at the table to make those things happen, and they make it fun, they make it engaging. If you go to the next slide, and yeah, we think it's a renewable energy source that can fuel community change and health. The next slide, I just have a couple of links and I'll put them in the chat because I know you probably won't be able to write them down. Oh, we still do bike decorating. So that, started out small, but it still happens at different events. The next slide has a couple of links. So one is to our Creative People Power reports. So if you're interested in reading more about that, you can download that for free. And then our Creative Exchange site has that toolkit for artistic bike racks and a lot of other toolkits for using art as a tool for community work. So I'll wrap up there. I have a little bit of time for questions, but you can also contact me if you want to chat more about how you might be able to do this type of work in your community. So yeah, I'm excited to hear questions. I think we just have like 5 minutes for questions, right, Natalie?
Yeah, we can take a few minutes here and, maybe I'll kick it off with a question that came up in the chat box here. There's one from Jordan Lutz from here in Bemidji asking about if the toolkit for creative bike racks is available via your website.
Yep, it is. And I want to make sure we actually worked with here, I'll put it in the chat after I'm done talking, but it's from actually an organization called Metro Arts. So oh, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, so there it is. And if you have questions about it, our staff can help you after you read it through. It's downloadable for free, but then you can contact us if you want to talk more. And I'm sure Wayne would be willing to share his wisdom too, having gone through the whole process.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Wayne, for adding that link. Something I just wanted to mention as well is that there are quite a few people from West Central Minnesota on the call today. Karen and Patrick from Partnership for Health are here, and Wayne Hurley from West Central Initiative. And also, it sounds like someone from MSUM is here that's working with Patrick and Partnership for Health as well. So this is great to have so much representation from that area of the state to just talk about these projects and hear about them. So does anyone else have a question for Michelle? I'm just kind of looking back through the chat box here to see if you have questions. You're welcome to put your question into the chat box if you'd like us to share it and respond to it, or you can unmute yourself if you would like to join by audio or audio and video. We love to see you if you'd like to ask Michelle a question.
I do see a question from Dave that maybe I might punt over to Wayne. Does the toolkit align with AP/BP bike rack regulations or guidelines? Wayne, do you have?
Yeah, I can answer that. We did use both, like Michelle said, the artist designed bike rack toolkit, and we also used both editions of the AP/BP bike parking guidance.
Awesome. I also just want to mention to folks that the state of Minnesota is just an incredible resource, or sorry, not the state, but the regional arts councils of Minnesota and the Minnesota State Arts Board have all kinds of grants to fund these types of projects. And that's one thing that we can also help you with, is thinking if you have a project and you have an artist and it's kind of all ready to go and you just need funding, we can help direct you to some sources there. And we're just so lucky to live in Minnesota and have that legacy money to support this kind of stuff.
Hey, this is Jake. Can I chime in for 1 second?
Yeah, hi Jake.
Hi. Since we're talking about money and bikes and everything, and also Michelle showed that Cycling Without Age slide, I just thought I had a good audience here to mention that this spring there's going to be an additional round of funding available for facilities to apply to purchase trishaws to use in the Cycling Without Age program in Minnesota. So if you are in a community who has been thinking about this or want to have more conversations about this, I would be happy to talk with you about that. I'm kind of helping them out with that program. I see Tony is on here. Tony's got his Twin Cities Cycling Without Age chapter, so he's a great resource as well. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful chance to combine both, passions for connection and cycling, and even a little bit of artistic interpretation on how you carry out a program like this.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Michelle. I think Jake did an excellent job, and he didn't even know this is probably what I was going to say next, is to introduce our second speaker for the webinar today, Tony Desnick. And I think I'll pivot to that introduction at this point, and we will have time at the end to take questions. So if you do have additional questions for Michelle or some questions that come up for Tony, you can ask those at the close of the webinar. So the next speaker we have is Tony Desnick. He's a parent, grandparent, urban designer, bike sharer, and longtime cycling advocate and activist. He has served as a member of the board of directors of Move Minnesota, the Winter Cycling Federation, and recently the North American Bike Share Association. He has spent much of his career advancing the cause of bikes beyond the perfect 19th century solution to a myriad of 21st century problems. His passion for bringing cycling to individuals and to communities is outlined in his 2016 TED Talk, The Amazing Ways Bicycles Change You. He is currently serving as executive director of Cycling Without Age Twin Cities and the Finnish Cycling Embassy. Welcome to the webinar, Tony.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's get started. Before I get to the content of the slides, I just want to talk very briefly about the Finnish Cycling Embassy. We're a nonprofit organization based in Helsinki that is doing, through outreach programs, helping cities and towns grow their mode share of cycling, particularly for commuting and for transportation in North America, Southern Europe, and Eastern Europe. And so today I wanted to talk just a little bit about how in the marketing collateral and in the other sorts of collateral that we as advocacy organizations use, they sometimes, well, they always tell a story. And sometimes that story may or may not be in line with what you want the message to be. So I'm going to go over just some examples that I found. And these are things that I pulled off of kind of everyday materials from Bike Minnesota and then from some organizations in Helsinki as well. And so we know that images can tell a story, the whole picture's worth 1,000 words. And so what are we trying to promote as advocacy organizations? Is it recreational cycling? Is it transportation, competition, fun, family, safety, an inexpensive way to move around? All of the above. If we aren't clear about the message, others will make the message for us. And so on this slide here, we're showing a photograph from the St. Paul Classic ad. And the sense that people are having just a great time at a wonderful event is captured very beautifully in the slide on the right. Together with my end of the year report from Dorian, he sent this picture, and it tells a story. This tells two stories in my way. It's really funny that, Dorian's obviously dressed for a certain kind of ride, a certain kind of distance, a certain kind of bicyclist. And whether or not you think that sends the message that you want it to send is not for me to judge. But the thing I really find great about this is that he's on the Gateway Trail, which is a really marvelous trail that get you from downtown St. Paul all the way to Stillwater. Next. Again, from their website, from your website, the BikeMN website, there's all kinds of images that begin to portray different kinds of riding in the winter, riding in the summer, kids. It's a marvelous collection of photographs to kind of send the message. Next. So then I went to the Finnish Federation of Cyclists, which is their BikeMN kind of. And Finland is 5.5 million people, so it's almost exactly the same population as Minnesota. And in there were people sort of milling about, wearing helmets, some not wearing helmets, and generally having a good time. This was promoting one of their, it's kind of their bike summit. They call it Velo Finland. Next. Again, I'm not going to make comments about every single one of these slides. You should be able to get a sense for what we're kind of showing there. She's happy. She's on her bike. Next. This is in Oulu, northern Finland, with a climate that's about the same as the Twin Cities, particularly in the winter. I'll talk a little bit more about Oulu in a second because they have become sort of the winter biking capital of the world. Next. Next. I mean, I don't need to comment on every slide here. Also from the Finnish Federation of Cyclists website. Next. I'll go back one. Sorry, Natalie likes this one because he looks like Brad Pitt. Go back, Natalie. We got to show him Brad Pitt. There we go. There's Brad. Okay. Go ahead. So the Finnish Federation of Cyclists has a complete winter biking program. Obviously, Finland is a dark place in the wintertime, and it's mostly a cold place. There's often a lot of snow, often not enough snow. And so some of the imagery I've captured here are the things that they've used in order to capture the feeling of what bicycling in the winter can be like. Okay, Natalie, I think this is the movie, if Ted can key up.
So I'm going off mute for a second here so I can just help us transition. I stopped sharing my screen and you should see a picture on your screen now with the person that has some lights on their jacket. And there'll be a little video here. So we'll go off mute so that we can share the audio along with the video. So hopefully you can follow along and see this on your screen.
So while we're moving back to the slides, I can talk a little bit about what you just saw. Every year in November, which is the darkest, most horrible month of the year in Finland, sun comes up in the morning if it's sunny, and it rarely is. Sun comes up at about 10 and it goes down at between 1:30 and 2 in the afternoon. So your complete commute, in any case, is in the dark. And so they do a campaign every year. They come out in the middle of a busy street and they hire a DJ to play tunes. And then these light heroes attach lights all over their jacket. And as people roll up with or without a light, they take a light off their jacket, put it on their bike, and then there's a consensual hug. It used to just be a hug, but now it's consensual hug. And so that's the way that they can equip Helsinki citizens with lighting on their bikes that they may not have. It's really a fun program. And then it's surrounded by a competition for who can do the best image in Finland that captures the essence of winter cycling. And so most of the rest of the slides are like that here, and we'll just kind of go through them quickly. Natalie? So these are images that people submit to win the prize, and the prize is a Pelago, which is a Finnish manufacturer bicycle. They make great bikes, and it's a prize worthy of winning. So they get, like, I think 5,000 or 6,000 entries. Next. Next. And next. And this is the one that won. It captured the essence, they thought, of real winter cycling. And in Helsinki, winter cycling often does not include snow. And this year, of course, it didn't. I think they just got a big snow about a week and a half ago, but that was the first of the season. Next. That might have been it. No. Oh, and then the last thing is, as Natalie mentioned, I'm on the board of the Winter Cycling Federation. And every year we put on a Winter Cycling Congress. 2016 was in Minneapolis. This year it's going to be an version for obvious reasons. And then next year we hope to be in a city on the European continent. But this year will be virtual, and I invite all of you to come online. It'll be very inexpensive. We're just working out the final details of that now. I think this is the last slide. Natalie, is it?
I think so. Did you have a link to how people can learn more about the Winter Cycling Congress, or how they might still submit an abstract if they'd like to present, that we could put in the chat box?
I can, well, it's wintercyclingfederation.org if you want to put it in the chat box.
Okay, I'll post that in there here, unless somebody's already beat me to it.
And if we've got a couple of minutes, I can talk briefly about what we're doing at Cycling Without Age, because people have been asking me about that.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and talk about that right now? Thanks.
Okay, I'll just take 2 minutes. We're really excited about the next phase. We have one trishaw that we bought, and we're serving 3 facilities until the COVID pandemic prevented us from doing so. But we applied for and received a $300,000 grant from the regional solicitation funds, the CMAQ money. CMAQ is congestion mitigation and air quality, to operate 2 trishaws in North Minneapolis, 2 in Seward, and 2 on the east side of St. Paul. Each of them would be pulling a trailer, and we're using it as a tool for food access. So we will pick up mostly elderly, but really anybody. People ride them fewer than 3 miles to the grocery store, help them shop, load up the bike, go back to their house and unload it. And we're using the trishaws as well for short trips to the doctor, to visit friends, or the hairdresser, really anything that people need travel for. The idea is that we're trying to replace metro mobility trips. And if we can reach our goals, we should be, over the 2-year life of the grant, we should be able to replace about 14,000 van trips with trishaw trips. And so it came about really as, having been involved with Cycling Without Age for several years now, it became kind of clear to me that it was really a lot of white people giving white people rides. And so I wanted, as much as we could, to move into neighborhoods that were lower income and had more racial diversity. So that's a nutshell about where we're going.
Cool. It's great to see how creative that is, and how you've pivoted during this time to, fully utilize those bikes. And I always love hearing about the winter cycling events, and about these opportunities for people to ride bike in the winter, and really showcase the images that you shared. This was really great, Tony, to see those images of people riding bikes in the winter, because it happens all the time, and there's a lot of people riding bikes in the winter. Obviously, we'd like to encourage people to ride bikes more often in the winter. But it's great to see those pictures, to just share, some of the things that are already happening. So I'd like to just open it up for questions for Tony, if you have anything specific what he shared in his presentation here, and then we'll close with some more broad Q&A and a few announcements.
Hey, Natalie, I have a question for Tony.
Go ahead.
It's mostly putting him on the spot a little bit. Tony, could you share about what Pekka did with the Winter Cycling Congress warm up, his live tour of infrastructure? Because I think that's something bike towns and cities around Minnesota could do to show off what's working and also what isn't.
Yeah, what Michele was talking about turned out to be one of the most exciting and talked about events at our pre-Winter Cycling Congress earlier in, was it October, I guess, and or November. Anyway, Pekka Takola from Oulu, he gave us a in real-time bike tour of his town at rush hour. Now, the downside for me was I was looking at this, and it was, of course, dark all the time, but he was able to sort of showcase how well they light the streets and how well they light side paths. And we've got 3 of those virtual tours live planned for the Winter Cycling Congress. One again in Oulu, one here in Minneapolis that I will do, and then the 3rd one will be in Edmonton, Alberta.
And I would just say that one of the most helpful things about the live element of it was we could say, Pekka, stop and show us this
Yes.
wayfinding, or tell us how you feel this stoplight is working or this intersection is working, et cetera. So it was very interactive, and it wasn't just somebody riding along with the camera going.
Right, right. Yeah, it was very interactive, and a lot of people had questions. You know, another thing, just because you asked about that, another thing about Oulu that I didn't put in the slide presentation, though I probably should have in retrospect, is there's a elementary school in Oulu that has 1,200 students, and just over 1,000 of them ride their bikes every single day in the winter. And again, Oulu is about as cold as Minnesota with a lot more snow. So it's really remarkable. And last August, when I was there meeting with partners and colleagues, I had told them about how we're working on various safe routes to school programs around the country. And they said, what? And I said, well, safe routes to school. And they didn't know what that was. And of course, they've been, they put first graders on city buses if they want to go to school in that way. And everyone's riding bicycles, and it's mostly safe to ride wherever you go in the city of Helsinki and suburbs.
Does anyone else have a question on what Tony shared that you might like to ask? You're welcome to put it into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question via audio, or both audio and video if you'd like. There are some comments here about in the chat box back and forth between a couple of folks here that we might share a little bit more about in a moment, unless some folks have some other questions directly for Tony.
Natalie, I wanted to add a billing that on the 17th, not only will there be a Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar, but we will also have our Day on the Hill. And Tony will be featured in our Day on the Hill presentation also because, and he'll talk about what he just presented to us, but he will also add more about the infrastructure programs that Finland is doing, and the Safe Routes to School programs that Finland is doing that have resulted in schools with 1,200 students and 1,000 of them riding their bike to school every day of the year, which is kind of a stunning thing. So I just wanted to share that. Come back. I hope you join us twice on March 17th. And that Day on the Hill will be from 4:30 to 6:30. Most of it will be just video presentations from a bunch of great people like Tony. But from 6 to 6:30, we will have key transportation funding and policy legislators live on the screen so you can ask them questions. And as I said, you're certainly welcome, since we're interrupting your happy hour, to bring the beverage of your choice, since you'll be joining us from maybe the same spot you're sitting right now.
You know, I also, Natalie, I see CJ in the photograph there, and he was at our last Winter Cycling Congress in Joensuu, Finland. So if anybody wants to hear about what happened at that event from somebody who didn't help plan it, hit CJ up.
Thanks, Tony. And if you haven't heard about the Winter Cycling Congress before, it's been going on for quite a few years now, and it's just a really awesome event that, we get to see how people all around the globe ride bikes in the winter and in different places and how they're going about it. And it's not just planning, but also advocacy and education in other areas where it's just really awesome. So yeah, join, sign up, participate if you can, speak if you can, and get involved. So we have a couple of announcements here, and then I'll wrap up with a final Q&A in just a moment. I'd like to go to this slide first. This is one of the slides that I'd like to share a little bit about here, and I'm going to welcome Carl to the call. He's on BikeMN staff here to share a little bit about this. So this is our remote bikeable community workshops that we're going to be holding in 2021. So Carl, would you like to share a little bit about this?
Thanks, Natalie. I'm the lucky BikeMN staffer who got to come into our office today as we're socially distancing. I got a beautiful morning bike ride in while everyone else is at home. Remote bikeable community workshops are an opportunity for local bike champions from your community to work alongside our team of experts from BikeMN, as well as Minnesota Departments of Transportation and Health. As evidence in the name, these workshops have been adapted to happen entirely remotely this year. These are going to include virtual presentations, breakout discussions, as well as a bike audit of being able to get out and ride your community with a discussion of that alongside us. This all culminates in a 6 to 12 month action plan for improving bikeability in your community. These action plans often include transit master plans, safe routes to school plans, concepts for planning bicycle facilities and infrastructure, as well as event planning for education or engagement. For the first time, we're opening these applications to both new and returning BCWs. So for those of you on the call who have had the opportunity to participate in this again, it's a great opportunity to jump on another one and take on what we're calling a step 2 opportunity to possibly focus on something to further your previous action plan or move in a new direction. Understandably, a lot of communities are going to be facing unique challenges or limits to capacity this year. So we put a lot of effort into simplifying the application, as well as we intend to meet communities where they are and adapt these workshops to really fit specific needs that you might have at this time. I'm going to throw a link to the section of our website in the chat that has both a planning guide where you can learn more, as well as the application itself on it. Feel free to contact me through your email or phone number in the chat, and I can give you a call to further chat if you have any questions, or I can jump on any initial ones now.
Thanks, Carl. This is great. There's a lot of people that are on the call today that are past participants in bikeable community workshops as they happened in person in a little bit different way, well, very different way, probably that they'll be delivered this year, but no less engaging, hopefully. And we're just really excited to have Carl on board here at BikeMN to head up this bikeable community workshop in the remote format this year. So thanks for sharing that update. I have one other slide I'm going to go to here, and then we will wrap up with a final Q&A. There's a couple questions in the chat box I will come back to in just a moment. But for a minute or two here, I'm going to hand the floor over to Ted to talk about winter trivia.
Sure, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, so we're extending trivia through March. So these dates will be easy to remember. I know there was some issue with registration, so I trust everybody on this call. I'm going to give you, I'll actually put the actual Zoom link in here in just a minute. But yeah, these are start at 6:30 p.m. February 11th and March 11th. And you can even study for these because we're giving you the themes in advance. So you're probably going to be able to figure out a few of the folks we're probably going to be talking about. Yeah, it's a good time. And we need somebody to, I don't think Rob's on this call, but Michele Molstad has won too many times and needs to be unseated. So if you have no other motivation than making somebody feel bad, please join us on one of those dates.
Thanks, Ted. So we had some people clapping remotely during your talk there, Ted. So I just wanted to share that as well. It's great this is such a fun event with the trivia. And as Michele had shared earlier in the webinar when we were introducing and just getting things rolling, she had held up her socks, I believe were a prize along the way here. So if you guys are seeing Michele on your screen, you can see those stylish, awesome BikeMN socks. So more prizes to be had. Thanks, Ted. So I'm going to close the webinar here in about 5 minutes. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions. There was one that was in the chat box here that was for Tony. So Tony, if you're still online here and I could direct this to you, there was a question about the time zone for the Winter Cycling Congress and if it was going to be a North American friendly time zone and if you could confirm whether that's the case or not.
It's an interesting question. We originally tried to think about having each presentation done at the same time of the day, but in a different time zone. So if I think about Central Time, it looks like we're going to be starting between 9 and 10 in the morning, and we should be done by mid-afternoon. And we just agreed prior to coming on this call that we would do it in 2 days instead of 1, so that people would have a better opportunity to not miss sessions. We're also talking about pricing, and it's going to be very cheap, somewhere in the order of $5 to $10.
Cool, thanks, Tony. All right, there's an additional comment in the chat box about the socks. So back to the socks again. You never know what's going to be popular in these webinars. You know, first it was Brad Pitt, now it's socks. I mean, there's no real connection between those two topics, but Sock Guy socks are available if you do make a donation to BikeMN. So not only could you try your skill and wit at joining TED for trivia, you could also make a donation to BikeMN and score a pair of those socks. So a couple of opportunities here. All right, so other questions that folks have for Michele Anderson or Tony Desnick, or just in general around the topic of imagery in biking and walking advocacy. You've seen a lot of pictures on the screen. We got to see that really cool video today that Tony shared, and just want to open it up for any other questions that you guys have.
Michele, I keep getting emails advertising for a rural program director for Springboard for the Arts. Are you still with Springboard?
Yeah, it's actually rural program manager.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, so you're still with Springboard and you're still in Fergus Falls.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. My initial fear was that meant you left and your position was being refilled. Okay, good. Thank you.
So if anyone knows someone looking for a job in Fergus Falls, we're hiring.
Thanks, Michele. And as Patrick calls out location, I see that he's maybe over in Finland with the Aurora Borealis in the background. So it's great to see everyone on here today. We have so many people from across the state and a lot of West Central Minnesota representation today. That's always great to see. And the arts comes at this advocacy question and approaches this in maybe a way that you haven't thought about just yet, and maybe introduced you to some new ideas or some things that might spark a new project or something in your own community. So we do have quite a few people from across the state of Minnesota that have joined the webinar today. Let's see if there's anything you might have learned today that you might be able to bring back home and implement that connects the arts with this advocacy. So any other final questions that anyone would like to ask? I see people are joining back on video. Some of you who were maybe not on video before, so feel free to jump in if you have a question for either of the speakers or for BikeMN staff. You have quite a few of us here as well.
I don't want to be a question hog.
And don't.
Go ahead.
And maybe this is a conversation for for the summit day, but with a new administration nationally that may be more open to ideas around multimodal transport. It seems like there is a real opportunity for storytelling and bicycles, and I'll be quiet and listen to Dorian.
Oh, well, you'll be happy to know that we've invited somebody from People for Bikes, the national organization, and also the League of American Bicyclists to talk about advocacy at the federal level. We will also, it will be I think it's the week after the National Bike Summit, which is also going to be a virtual event. But I would love to work with you all because this afternoon I have a call with the League of American Bicyclists legislative coordinator or whatever. And we're going to talk about how to get somebody, at least one person from every congressional district in Minnesota to schedule a meeting to talk about with their member of Congress, to schedule a meeting and talk about these opportunities that you're that are going to be presented by the league and the and People for Bikes.
Natalie, could I ask a follow-on to Dorian? As many of us may know, Robin Hutchison, who used to be the public works director for the city of Minneapolis, left rather abruptly with like a 1-week notice. And the smart money in town seems to be that she's going to be working in the Buttigieg transportation department. And I don't know that that's true, but I was wondering if, Dorian, you had any inside knowledge.
Nope, I don't. But
have you heard the same rumors?
Yes, and
Okay.
I hope it's true.
Yeah, me too.
True. She's been a wonderful advocate for cycling. And for those of you who don't know, South Bend, Indiana became a bicycle-friendly community while Pete Buttigieg was the mayor. So he understands that message, and I'm very excited about it. And I'm very excited about the communities that we're working with right now in Minnesota that are going to turn in bike-friendly community applications in 2021.
That's very exciting, Dorian. And stay tuned to everyone who's listening in or tuning into the replay of this webinar after today, because we will have more information for you soon. I can't steal the thunder before anything goes public about some of these new things coming down the line about bicycle-friendly community or bicycle-friendly business. So I will pause and stop. However, I do want to let you know there is some exciting information that you will find out if you join on February 17th and then again on March 17th. So stay in touch, get on the listserv for the network if you're not already on there, and we'll get you some information. So there will be a follow-up email that has the link to this replay if you would like to watch the replay or share it with other people. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar today, and I'm going to close. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.